Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Med Mentors Monday. Today, we're going to be talking about how to choose a medical school. I'm joined by four amazing medical students who all have introduced themselves. Whoever wants to introduce themselves first, we'll just have everybody say their name, what year they're in, what program they're in, and anything else that you want to share about yourselves.
I can go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Michaela. I'm a third year, fourth year, kind of in the middle. I'm in the CDU UCLA medical education program, and I'm originally from South Dakota, so I made a big leap for medical school.
Hi, everyone. I'm John. I'm also rising third year and fourth year. I'm just regular MD program. And I am originally from the Philadelphia area and came out here for med school.
Hi, y'all. My name is Randy. I'm a first year in the traditional David Geffen School of Medicine program. And I'm originally from Taiwan, but spent the last couple of years in San Diego.
Hi, everyone. My name is Manish. I'm also a first year in the David Geffen program, and I am from Pennsylvania. And yeah, I went there for undergrad, just moved here for the beginning of med school.
Perfect. Thank you all for joining. And then my name is Rohini. I'll be moderating today's event. I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona. I went to Arizona State, and I'm in the David Geffen program. So we have sectioned this event into 3 different sections. So how to choose a medical school, finalizing your application cycle, and then we'll be answering questions from the audience and the questions that you submitted when you RSVP'd. So the first question in our section of how to choose a medical school is for our panelists to just describe what factors that you considered when you were choosing a medical school and how did you prioritize those different factors?
I mean, I can go first if that's good. For me personally, the 2 things I looked at, one were the factors that are intrinsic to medical school itself, like the grading, the curriculum, things like that. And the second one were more so the environment where the med school is. So for example, at UCLA, I really wanted a med school that was pass-fail, like true pass-fail, no internal rank, no grades, because I thought it would help take the stress off your intern. You're not worrying about and like you tend to have a more supportive student body too when like helping people just helps everyone as opposed to like you're worrying about like which percent of the class you fall in and things like that. I also wanted a med school that was 1 year pass-fail because step 1 is now 1 pass-fail. So I thought as a school at UCLA that had both of those was something I really valued. UCLA even goes like the extra step, and we have our clinicals also be pass-fail now, which is somewhat rare for medical schools. So yeah, that was all nice. And the second part is like, especially as someone I'm 23, and I really wanted to spend my 20s in a like a major city. The environment of that was something I wanted to be in. And also I'm from the East Coast. I spent my entire life in Philadelphia, and I wanted to go somewhere new and to spend most of my time there and get to know new people and just form a whole new group. So yeah, LA worked out pretty well for me. I never thought I'd end up coming here, but I'm really glad I'm here now.
Anybody else have any factors you want to share, or I can ask the next question too?
I can jump in. Mine were a little bit different. Similar to the extent of wanting to kind of go somewhere new, explore somewhere I hadn't lived before. And I think it was great that, LA has the perfect weather and about 1 million things to do. But for me, the pass-fail in the curriculum wasn't something I considered heavily when I was considering where to go to medical school. But looking back, definitely something I am grateful to have and something I would have considered. But for me, some of the bigger things were overall cost and what the scholarship financial aid package looked like, and then opportunities for research and just, clubs, extracurriculars, things to get involved with on campus outside of, not sure if I froze there, but outside of just schoolwork. So for me, coming out here kind of had the best of everything I was looking for.
Yeah, just to add on a little bit to what Manish and Michaela had sort of brought up, I think one of the major things that I sort of looked at in terms of selecting a medical school was really to find a place that had the infrastructure and also the willingness to support the things that I was sort of interested in learning more about. I am very, very much into working with the in-house community and working at different mobile clinics and things like that, or even free clinics. And a lot of the schools that I sort of looked at would have a free clinic, but they maybe operate only once a month. And it'd be sort of hard to be able to sort of participate and sort of join in and learn from those different environments. LA being a place where the unhoused community is humongous, much larger than it should be. And it also has infrastructure for a lot of different clinics that are sort of going on to sort of help out with the unhoused community. And so I saw it as the best place sort of for me to go to sort of be able to engage in what I was passionate about and my interests. And that's what ultimately drove me to select UCLA as the school I attended.
John, I don't know if you had a different answer, or we can also move on to the next question.
Everyone pretty much hit what I was considering. I guess one thing that I hadn't thought about that I wish I had, but fortunately UCLA has this as like a pro, is just diversity of training sites, and sort of the logistics of training sites as well. I remember at like a couple schools that I interviewed at, there were situations where you would be like potentially put up in like a different city sometimes if that's how like your rotations fell, which would kind of be a pain. But secondarily, just like having a diverse patient population and seeing diverse types of hospitals and like the VA versus like our county sites versus like Reagan is really cool aspect of training.
Yeah, I think that is also something that I really considered and really have appreciated about UCLA, is that we get to go to so many different sites and also get to work with so many different electronic medical records, which will help us so much when we go on to our next steps in our career. The next question I have is actually going to be interesting because we have some people that did have in-person interviews and then some people that interviewed online. How did you sort of gauge your fit at schools? And if you did go to the school, like, did you visit your schools before making a decision? Yes or no, and how did that help you gauge your fit for the school?
I could start. So I was still in person at interview day. So that definitely helped a lot. I feel like overall, just in the interactions of both the people, as well as like the fellow candidates, gives you a good sense of both what the school is looking for and also what they value and who you talk to. And that generally both like UCLA and other schools that I was considering gave me like a warm feeling and felt like I could belong at that school.
I will say that I also interviewed in person, but I found it really hard to assess how I would fit at each medical school because each medical school is showing you their very best self during interview days. And, you know, the faculty are super happy you're there. All of the other interviewees are like, you know, ecstatic and showing their best selves. And so I found it hard because I thought it was great to see the very best of each school, but I also wanted like a more realistic picture, if you will, of what the day-to-day is like, or maybe what the med students didn't like. And so I think as I kind of went on throughout the interview season, I tried to do a better job about asking medical students, you know, like, what are the things you don't like, or what are the things you think could be better? And to me, those are the people who would give me the best answers or the most honest answers as compared to the faculty interviewers, who sometimes may not have as, you know, accurate of a picture as to what's going on because they're not the medical student there at that time. So definitely take advantage of asking questions during Q&A panels or one-on-ones just to get a better sense of, you know, not only the good, but also potentially the bad or the things that could be different.
Yeah, I like what Michaela said about sort of asking those questions. I was with the virtual interviews. And so in a sense, it was really hard to sort of picture whether or not I would fit in at a school because I actually never even saw the school for the first time until the first day of school. And so for me, that was a little bit difficult. I do agree. And so I try to ask faculty members sort of more like day-to-day life type of questions. I lived in San Diego last couple of years, but had never actually lived in Los Angeles. And so I asked them a lot of questions because a lot of those folks had sort of been in LA for 10, 20, 30 years, sort of, you know, whether or not they enjoyed living in LA. What are the pros and cons of living in a city like Los Angeles? And then I would reach out after interviews to ask admissions committees via email whether or not there are current students that I could sort of get connected with. And then once I sort of talk to students, sort of like what Michaela was saying, really asking the students what the day-to-day life looks like for a student. A lot of them would tell me, you know, there's a lot of things I really enjoy, and others would say there's a lot of things I don't really enjoy. And like what Michaela was also mentioning, a lot of those negatives I actually found to be a lot more helpful. Sort of like the realistic side of what occurs in medical school was really helpful for me to differentiate between schools and also try to figure out which medical schools were truly incredibly supportive of their students and also very proactive in sort of responding to some of the issues or concerns that their students had.
Manish, did you have any different answers or kind of echoing what everyone else is
No, that was pretty much the same things. To be entirely honest, I wasn't the best to talk on this either because I didn't look so much at the benefits and downsides beyond what was given to me on paper and the people I met in second look. So yeah, like I already knew I wanted to. I kind of had an idea of what school I wanted to go to and where I wanted to be, and this fit all of them. So beyond that, I didn't really bother checking more because I knew it wouldn't change my answer. But that was just given my situation.
Absolutely, that's fair. For everyone, were there specific things that now being in medical school you would have wanted your past self to have asked about when you went on interviews or went to second look? Like factors maybe you weren't considering initially when you were interviewing that you would now?
I think I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but definitely how the curriculum is set up. So pass fail and pre-clerkship stuff. Is it pass fail when you get into the wards? To be honest, to me, the beginning part of medical school is a lot less stressful than even college for that reason. You're still working really hard, but you don't have that stress of trying to get a certain grade or something. And if you have weeks where you slip up, you can make up for that and still do well before the final comes. So I feel like that's really important. And I know medical students who went through graded systems, and for some of them, it was really, really stressful, and to the point that it made medical school very much unenjoyable, and it's, put a large burden and toll on their life. So I think that was something that after the fact, just considering that what's important to you in terms of how you're graded. But then I know some people at some medical schools do have a rank, but the medical school doesn't share that with them. And so for some individuals, maybe even going as far as asking, like, do you rank your medical students? If so, do you share that with students? Things like that may be important, because it's one thing to be ranked, but not know where you are kind of going into, residency applications.
I think one thing I would have wanted to ask a little bit more about was sort of accessibility resources that are available at each school. If you're sort of someone that can foresee, maybe you need to take time off to go to see the doctors, or you're the caretaker for someone else in your family, and so you need to make time for that. I think definitely asking about how flexible is a school sort of willing to work around you to make sure that you're also taking care of yourself and taking care of the other people who you're responsible for. That's a really big thing, because I think DGSOM has done a pretty good job of that so far, at least for me. But I have friends at other schools who are incredibly frustrated because they're the type of person that, they might have to go to the doctors to do a checkup or a lab every 2 weeks. And their schools are sort of saying, no, you can't do that. You're missing mandatory class, and you have to make up this class, and there's no way for you to make up this class. And so that can be an incredibly frustrating thing. And so if you're the person that sort of foresees needing to take time off, regardless of whatever reason it is, just make sure that you ask the schools, how do they sort of work up around that, and whether or not the school is amicable to sort of work around that in the first place.
Anybody else have any other factors that they wanted to bring up? You can also ask the next question. Okay, so what we have a question in the chat actually. I'm not sure if anybody had this experience when they were applying to medical school, but we have someone who's asking about negotiating financial aid offers between different schools. For their example, they have multiple schools giving them different offers, but there's a school that they haven't gotten as like that financial aid offer from, that they're wondering how can they go about negotiating. If anybody has any experience, that would be great.
I mean, it's not too difficult. It's mostly just the logical thing you do. You just want to be polite about it. You mentioned your financial aid offer from typically you want it to be from an equal or higher school, but if not, you can still send it in. They're just less likely to actually do something about it. But yeah, you just mentioned your offer and you attach their like when they give you an offer letter, the actual like official confirmation of it, attach that to your email, and then just ask them, like, you basically just phrase it pretty much the way you did. I would love to come to the school. Just for financial reasons, it would be a little difficult for me. Is there anything you can do about that? Obviously, like, phrase it a little more formally, but that's the gist of it.
Okay. Another question, as we think about like people finalizing their application cycle, is what advice that you would have to give to someone who's on the wait list for a school that they really want to attend?
I'm happy to answer this question because I was actually on the wait list for this school. I'm here now, fortunately. I think really just waiting, trying to do something else. Actually, sorry, scratch it. Don't just wait. Please, please, please do something else to sort of fulfill yourself. And also just to be able to take off your mind off of the whole medical school process, actually. I was very fortunate to have been accepted at a different school. And so it wasn't really the waiting to see whether or not I would be attending medical school. But I knew deep down that UCLA was my absolute #1 choice where I would want to attend. And realistically, the waiting process takes quite a long time. I think folks start to sort of hear back from waitlist somewhere around May 1st. I actually didn't hear back until the end of May for UCLA specifically. And so it was a bit of a longer wait for me too. And so I sort of like to say that what's sort of meant to happen will happen. And thinking a little bit more about it doesn't necessarily change anything. I know that during my cycle, after I sort of heard back from the wait list, I did send a very, very brief message to UCLA just to reiterate my interest, let them know that I was still very, very much interested in attending the school, and it absolutely was, the place I wanted to go, and sort of listed out my reasons for that. And then after that, I just sort of let it be and did other things to try to keep my mind off of it.
Yeah, that's really helpful advice, and Randy. John, did you have another piece of advice?
Yeah, similarly, I also got it off the wait list. It was just a long wait, more or less. I didn't get in really until like the end of May, if I remember correctly. But yeah, the only thing I did was I sent like a letter of intent of like, hey, I'd really like to go here if I got in. These are the reasons why, UCLA resonates with me. And then that was it. I just, put it out of my mind because that's all you can do.
So mine, I was not on the wait list at UCLA, but I was on the wait list at Penn. And the one thing that I want to share too is give the school that you get into, even if it's not your dream school, if you get into another medical school, give it a shot and like actually look into it, because Penn was my #1 choice the entire time I applied. When I didn't get in, it was actually a weird situation where based on like the timing of a random call I got, and the timing of their acceptance call, I was basically under the impression I got in and I just missed the call. And then finally I found out I never made it. So I was like devastated. I was really sad about it. And then I came to UCLA, I think 2 weeks later for second look. And I loved this place. I absolutely loved it. But had I gone into Penn, I never would have even given it a second thought. And now, like, I realize, like, after having been here for a few months, I'm pretty sure anyway, and I have some friends at Penn, that I am far happier here than I ever would be at Penn. So sometimes, like, even if you think you'd love a certain place, it's your dream school. I never knew anything about Penn's internals, how their grading worked, how they're and it's a lot different than here and a lot more competitive. But I didn't like think about any of those things. It was just the school that was next to my home, the school I always heard about, and I really wanted to go there. So like, yeah, I think the other thing is if you're on a wait list for one school and you have other options, like actually deeply consider your options. And I'm not saying like you'll always be happy. Maybe some of them won't be what you like, but sometimes maybe you just haven't given it a thought because you've been really absorbed in that one school that you always thought of yourself as wanting to go to. So
you had alluded to second look, and as second look is starting to come up for a lot of schools, for any of you who did attend a second look virtually, or I think all of us attended virtually if we attended a second look, how did that help at all in your decision making, or maybe it didn't help in your decision making? How did you utilize second look for all of your schools?
for me personally, I mean, since I just mentioned it too, for me personally, second look didn't influence my ultimate decision to come to UCLA because like there were other factors in it. I looked at the curriculum and everything, and I was pretty sure this is where I wanted to go to. On top of that, the cost, strangely, my in-state schools in Pennsylvania cost more than UCLA despite paying out-of-state tuition, even just for the first year. After that, we get in-state tuition. But like despite that, I still would be paying less. If I was charged out-of-state for all 4 years, I'd still be paying less than in-state in Pennsylvania. So I was pretty sure I'd have to come here. But second look made me really happy about it. Like it went from me saying like, okay, I'm going to come here as like a statement of fact, as something that like made rational sense, to actually emotionally wanting to be here. Because I really enjoyed my time here. The students were welcoming, the faculty was really welcoming. And LA itself was like welcoming in a way that Pennsylvania or Philadelphia is not necessarily at times. People here, the weather here, like just everything all together, I was a really big fan of.
Amazing. And then before whoever answers this next, I would love if you could also just define second look, because I recognize that this is new for some people.
I think of second look day as like similar to interview day in that you get a glimpse of the curriculum, you get to meet the faculty and current students, but you don't have the stress of undergoing that interview because you've already been admitted. So it's really the time to dive a little bit deeper into the curriculum, get to know the current students, ask faculty the questions that, you're debating between different medical schools that you may or may not have the opportunity to have a second look for, but really just to give, if it were in person, it would also give you the opportunity to see the campus once more. But really just to give that school, another thought, and they may provide more information about financial aid opportunities, scholarships, things like that, and just get a little bit deeper into what it would look like if you were to attend.
Yeah, and just to talk a little bit more about second look too, the schools that I was sort of considering, they were far away from California. And for me specifically, I grew up in Taiwan, spent most of my life there. I'm very much used to hot, humid weather, not very used to cold, dry weather. And so I basically went to second look, not so much to actually find out more about the school, but to actually see if I could even survive sort of in the weather that the school was at. And so that's what I went there for, and very much confirmed that I can't survive in cold weather. And so I decided to stay closer to home, closer to California. The other thing that I also wanted to do is I'd realized that, sort of throughout my undergraduate and also post-bac years, I realized that I actually got a lot of energy and really actually loved it when the people that I was surrounding myself with were a similar type of person that I was, sort of like finding my own people. And so I also really wanted to make sure that going to Second Look that I was meeting people and that I could sort of envision going to school with them. Because in a sense, some of these people are going to be your classmates for the next 4 years, or additional if you have any other additional programs that you're sort of applying to. And so I went to Second Look really figuring out two things. One, whether or not I could enjoy the weather, whether or not I could see myself living there for 4 years. And the other thing, also seeing whether or not these were people that I could relate with, people that I could form friendships with, people that I could sort of just enjoy hanging out sort of on any evening or any weekend. And that's what Second Look was for me.
Okay. The next question that I had was also more of a definition kind of question, just because there's a lot of lingo that comes up this time of year. So I was wondering if somebody could just define the difference between plan to enroll and commit to enroll.
Plan to enroll is April 15th, I believe is the deadline. Commit to enroll, I think, is either April 30th or May 1st. Plan to enroll is you have to have plan to enroll is not a commitment. Like, I mean, by definition, I guess. But you just mark the school that you plan to enroll, but you're not locked into that school. And I realize now I got those dates completely wrong. April 30th, I think, is plan to enroll. Commit to enroll varies by school, and it's between June and August usually. But yeah, for plan to enroll, at that point, you can only have one college selected that you plan to enroll into. Like, it signals to all the colleges you've chosen one, April 30th. And at that point, your only further offers can come from the waitlist. Once you hit commit to enroll, you can't go to any other college. Like, if your commit to enroll is like July 1st, you hit CTE, and then August 1st, a spot opens up at another college, you get a waitlist offer. You can't take it once you commit. But the thing is that won't happen, because when you hit commit to enroll, it signals to all the schools that you hit that on AMCAS, so they won't give you an offer like that anyway. But in theory, if you would have been accepted had you like not committed, you just would never know, because the CTE, once you commit to that, you can't change it.
Yeah, just one thing to add on to what Manish said. This was something that I made a mistake with my my cycle. Like Manish said, if you click commit to enroll, you remove yourself from every single waitlist that you're on. And so one thing that I would want to bring up is that you can also advocate for yourself if you need more time to sort of make that decision. At that time, I had one school that sort of asked me to do the CTE, the commit to enroll, at a pretty early date. And I didn't realize that it was actually going to take me off every single wait list. And so other schools, after I press that button, they're like, hey, like, we just want to double check. We saw that you put commit to enroll. Are you not considering us anymore? And that was absolutely not my case. I was considering them. I was waiting for them. But there was another school that had asked me to do it a little bit earlier. And so I went back to them and sort of asked them if this was something that I can do. They sort of had to leap through a lot of different administrative holes. Just because of that entire process. And they told me, if you need more time to make these decisions, just tell us ahead of time. The worst that we can really do is say no. But if you're waiting on a school, if you need 10 more days, if you need 2 more weeks, if you need 3 more days, whatever the time limit is, just ask us. And then if that's okay with us, we'll let you know, and you'll have that extra time to sort of make your decision.
Great. So now we're going to start answering questions from the people who RSVP'd. One of the questions that's come up is a lot of schools' mission statements feel very similar to each other. Is it helpful to choose schools based on mission statement, or are there other things that you would use to figure out between schools, especially if you're doing this without seeing the school in person?
I think for the most part, mission statements do more to tell you what the school needs to tell people it is rather than what it actually is. Because the mission statement is the signal for the school to people reading it, as to what it like aspires to be. It doesn't necessarily mean that the school actually lives up to its supposed standards for itself. So definitely look more at the curriculum and look at what the school actually does to determine whether or not the mission statement aligns with what you want to do. Because yeah, if you go purely off the mission statement, that doesn't mean the school is actually going to uphold any of the things that it is written there. It's just one of those things that's like nice to say in theory. Kind of like I mean, as applicants, I think almost everyone talks about service to the underserved, but like 70% of doctors stay in overserved areas. So everyone plays that game a little bit, applicants and the schools.
I think it was mentioned previously before, but the best way that I sort of found to differentiate between schools was talking to current students, because current students would sort of tell you what it is at the school. And the other sort of caveat to that is also make sure you're asking for multiple current students to sort of talk with. Simply by chance, if you only talk to one current student, it might be the one person who absolutely loves the school. On the other hand, it could also be the person who absolutely does not like anything about the school that they're attending. And so try to ask for a wide variety of students to sort of talk to. And if you have that opportunity, taking that chance to really see what school is like from a student perspective.
I would say too, just one other thing. You can learn a lot about a school and what they like feature on their website and what's like in their news portion or like what activities are available. It could both be like the things that they show and also the things that are absent. You can just kind of like figure out what their goal is, kind of like what Manish was saying.
Okay. Another question is for all of you, how do you balance and weigh between cost of attendance of a school versus prestige or the school's ranking?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Sure. How do you balance between the cost of attendance of a school or your financial aid package versus the prestige and the ranking of the school?
I think that's a tough question. If I were in your shoes, I mean, I think, the financial aid package is a huge component. You're going to get a great education or almost regardless of where you go. And beyond that, I would look to see, what does the school offer that you're interested in terms of research, in terms of extracurriculars, in terms of support, and consider that, and while you're considering financial aid and then potentially like prestige. Something else, if you're like concerned about going somewhere that doesn't have, the prestige, is look at where their match lists are going and look at what they're matching into, because that can give you an idea of, if I attend a medical school that maybe has less prestige, are they still matching really well? Are they matching, into more specialties, primary care? Where are they matching? Is it tend to be located where the medical school is or in that state, or are they kind of going all over the place? Because that can give you an idea as to how well that medical school is preparing medical students to compete for in-residency applications. But don't neglect financial aid, because that's a huge component, and cost can be a lot. But it also depends on what the school can offer in terms of research opportunities and other things for you.
I think what you achieve in medical school matters a lot more than which medical school you went to. Yeah, it plays a role, but it's not going to, like, it's not like in business or tech where your school matters a lot just to even get an interview. I think the one thing to be aware of, though, is general. This is a general trend, not like absolute. But the schools that tend to be more kind to students in terms of like having like true pass-fail clinicals, better financial aid, even in terms of need-based aid. Those schools tend to be more concentrated towards the top, partially because because the expectation is people that get into these schools are, I guess, more likely, from residency directors' opinions anyway, more likely to be good students. So they tend to be more okay with that. So that's just something to like look for. It doesn't mean like the better prestige school will definitely be like the better school, like in terms of treating its students well, or like having these measures, but just something to keep in mind. Like make sure you look for that and ask about that, and just the quality of life of students there. Ask about that in both schools.
Another question is, how much should your personal narrative or things that you're interested in coming into medical school play a role in how you choose a medical school? For example, if you come into medical school with a particular interest in a specialty or serving a particular population, how much would you let that play a role in your decision to pick a medical school?
I think that in a way kind of speaks to the school's mission. And I certainly wouldn't want to be going somewhere, wanting to serve the underserved, ending up at a school where that's not even a possibility. So I think that it's important. I think you should definitely look at if you think there are, certain research things you're interested in or certain populations, what is going to give you that experience? If you're really not interested in research and you go to some school that makes every single person do research, how happy are you going to be? So I would say that should be an important factor when looking at where to go.
And then another question that has come up is, what are your recommendations for an out-of-state student who is looking to apply to Southern California medical schools?
I think it's a hard question regardless of, applying to SoCal or from a state, but, trying to apply out of state anywhere. But I think really showing the school, explaining in your interviews why you want to go there, what does that particular school offer, maybe even more so than the general region, but also like what is that area going to give you that you wouldn't get anywhere else, can be a really strong reason for that school to accept you. Also adding, what are you going to want to do when you're at that school? Like, what would you get involved in if you were a student? Things like that. Trying to show the school why you're a good fit is really important.
Yeah, just to add on to Michaela, can't really speak about the other Southern California schools, but I think it's actually quite favorable here at UCLA. We have a lot of out-of-state students in each class. And then what other things that you could sort of think of? I also thought about demographics. So really, if you think about, broader, this is true for, I think, a lot of medical schools, but a lot of medical schools will sort of have the mission of also serving the people that are living in sort of the local area. So it might be a little bit harder if you're from out of state and haven't been to Southern California before. But if you do a little bit of research or looking into it or asking folks who are from Southern California, getting a feel for what those demographics sort of look like. If there's a certain patient population or community that you feel very passionate about working with, that you have worked with a lot extensively in the past, that can also be another tie-in, is that, whatever patient population or community that you work with, it is, very well represented in here in Los Angeles, and you want to learn more from that community.
Okay, another question is, what did you do in the months prior to starting medical school? And then for those of you who had to move from farther away, when did you start planning your move? And when did you actually move here?
So I moved across the country. I would say be overly generous with your time. I could have worked at my job probably until my move date, but I gave myself like a solid month just to relax, make sure, I was packed for everything, had all my housing straightened out. Fortunately, I just lived on campus at UCLA, but that's like an added stress as well if you need to find like off-campus housing. Just overall like plan for something to go awry and just like give yourself plenty of time to be able to do that. Yeah.
Anyone else have any recommendations for what to do in the months leading up to medical school?
Anything but study. Some people will ask, what should I study? Should I try to get through certain things beforehand? And I would absolutely say no. Medical school, they'll teach you everything you need to know starting at day one. So don't waste your time trying to get ahead in a sense. Really enjoy that time. To John's point, I think I maybe gave myself 2 weeks between when I stopped working the job I was working and when I just had off, and then when I moved here, and I moved, I think we started on August 3rd or something, and I didn't want to pay the month of rent beforehand, so I moved August 1st, and it was definitely stressful. So definitely give yourself time, and I wish I would have given myself a little more time to explore the city and just do a little bit before jumping right into med school.
Yeah, to build on to the sort of what to do before coming to medical school. If you're the type of person that has always wanted to backpack for a month in Europe or wherever it is, please go ahead and do it. We, at least speaking to the new curriculum that we have at UCLA, it's going to be a little bit different at every school. But for example, we don't really have a full summer off. And so big long breaks that are sort of longer than 2 weeks are going to be a little bit hard to come by in medical school. And so if you want to travel internationally or even just, within the United States for extended period of time, please, please, please go ahead and do that. Start before you start medical school is sort of the best opportunity that you have to do that without needing to worry about making up assignments or, all these other things that sort of happen once you start medical school.
If you are going to do that, though, just make sure you have all your paperwork straightened out.
Great. And then a question about financial aid. Is there any financial aid in the medical school admissions process? And then is there any financial aid when you're in medical school, like that you can apply for in medical school?
I think this will vary a little bit depending on the medical school that you attend to. At least here at UCLA, I think need-based scholarships cap out around half tuition. Please correct me if I'm wrong, anyone on the call. But I think half tuition is pretty generous in terms of helping cover some of the things that you need to pay for in medical school. The other thing that's also available for folks who have a lower sort of expected family contribution is something called the loans for disadvantaged students. It's not very often sort of advertised out there, but if you have an expected family contribution quite low, there's loans that are offered through the federal government that are subsidized. So very different from the typical graduate loans that folks get, where interest rates sort of start counting and building starting from the day that you sort of take it out. These loans are going to be subsidized for all throughout your medical education. That includes not just medical school, that also includes your residency program. And so if that's sort of the bucket that you're in, you're a low income person, wherever school that you sort of attend, go ahead and ask them about the loans for disadvantaged students program to see if you qualify, because it's definitely, at least for me, it's very helpful in terms of easing some of my worries about the finances and borrowing lots of loans to attend school.
A question that's come up in the chat is, this is more about when you're applying for medical school, but when is the right time to buy the MSAR and how can you use it to compare your schools?
I don't remember exactly how far in advance from applying that I bought it. But I would definitely give yourself a little bit of time because it is super useful. And I think it would be advantageous to get it, you know, a couple months maybe before you start thinking about applying. And the reason is it can tell you where your application stands as compared to typical people they've admitted in the past. So you can compare your MCAT score, your GPA, your overall GPA, and your science GPA. You can compare things like how much research, work, volunteer experience, if you have military experience. And it can break it down even in terms of how many in-state versus out-of-state applicants they've admitted, which can be really helpful if you're trying to apply out of state. And I'm probably missing things that it also touches on, but I found it very, very helpful because it was one place where I could easily go and compare schools in terms of their admission statistics. And I thought that was important to me because I wanted to apply places to where I thought I would have a decent chance, as well as, you know, some reach schools and some schools I thought that I could for sure hopefully get in at, because you don't just want to be throwing your money away applying to every single school, and to schools that you know you may not be a good candidate for.
Just to emphasize kind of one point that Michaela said, the in-state, out-of-state ratio is really, really important. If you're looking to go somewhere that you're not like close to regionally, UCLA was like somewhat of an exception compared to other schools in the region with how many out-of-state people they took, which is why I ended up applying. And then one other thing is like if your school, like your college that you attend has any statistics on like prior applicants, that can also be really helpful. Because then it's like more tailored to sort of the reputation that you have going into the application and like how much weight your school carries.
Going back to an earlier question where we talked about moving to medical school, what are your thoughts on picking between like student housing, like grad student housing, versus living off campus or maybe even farther from med school, or commuting from your home if it's not in the close area near your school?
I personally didn't make the biggest move going from San Diego to Los Angeles, but I've never been in Los Angeles before and actually don't know anyone who lives in Los Angeles. And sort of the way that I thought about housing is that my first year, I would just do grad housing. That'd be on campus. It'd be super easy to set up. The school or, you know, whatever university it's at would sort of set that up for you. And a lot of times rent is also a little bit subsidized. So at least for LA, if you're sort of looking to live by yourself in like a 1-unit type of housing situation, it's pretty much as cheap as it gets if you're looking for like a safe situation to live in at least. And so I just thought it as the quick, easy, simple way to find a place to live. And then if I ended up finding people that I wanted to live with my second year, or, you know, I'd also give my time that first year to just understand what the different neighborhoods, how traffic works in LA, what direction should I live in if I do choose to live a little farther off campus. I wanted to give myself that time. And then my second year, I'll then move off campus and be able to, you know, make rent a little bit cheaper that way.
Anyone else have any thoughts that they wanted to share about housing?
I would echo everything Randy said. I was not familiar with the area, so grad housing tends to be the easiest and often even the closest to the medical school. And I think for the first year went without a car, and so that was also nice because it was in walking distance to the medical school. So if you're not from the area, grad housing is definitely the easiest. And has the fewest logistics to try to work out in those initial months. And the nice part is you can, I guess I broke my contract early and left halfway through the first year, just because I had found a much more affordable place and it wasn't too far from where I was. So there's also that option too, if you do find a spot that maybe opens up before the year's up.
And then for all of you, as you were thinking about your fit at a school and the community and support system, how did you kind of elicit just like the supportiveness or the community aspect of a school? And then for you at UCLA, how soon did you start making friends or getting to know your future classmates?
I think the fit part was hard, kind of to what we all talked about earlier, but some of it is just a leap of faith, and knowing that, you know, you've seen the current medical students who are happy and like their lives, and they are appreciative of various opportunities that the school offers, and just kind of going with your gut. That's what I did in terms of fit for med school. And then in terms of, you know, making friends, typically there's always like a Facebook group chat or some sort of other messaging system. I think, what did we have, Rohini? You made it. We had
we started with a group me, and then we did Slack,
group,
we had
yeah.
Facebook,
So
we did it all.
Yeah, literally everything. So, you know, you'll start to meet people kind of virtually in that way, and potentially like Zoom rooms, things like that will come up. And then that first week of med school, and even the first months, you just, you know, take the opportunities to go to events, go to talks. That's the best way to meet people, is, you know, just go to luncheons and various things that the school offers. And from there, yeah.
Okay, as we start to round out the hour, any last pieces of advice for people as they're choosing what school to go to, or any words of wisdom that you have for anybody listening?
I think my biggest piece of advice is really, you know, once you kind of have an idea in terms of where you're interviewing, is to go into them being yourself, because being yourself, you know, amongst the school and amongst other people can really show you if you're going to fit in with those people or not. And that can kind of give you an idea on a more personal note, if those are people you could foresee spending, you know, at least the next 4 or more years with. And it is a long process and pretty nerve-wracking, but, you know, take it a day at a time, and make sure you consider the factors that are most important to you at the end of the day when choosing where to go.
Yeah, just one piece of advice for folks who are fortunate to have the opportunity to sort of choose between schools right now in this process. I would say really go with your gut. I think there's a lot of times when I was sort of trying to make that process, I was always be like, oh, what about this? Or what about that? Or schools will email you and they'll suddenly mention some sort of random opportunity. I'll be like, oh my God, that is so cool. But at the end of the day, I always had this sort of gut feeling that I wanted to stay near home. I wanted to be near my support system, want to be near my friends and things like that. And so if there's something in your gut that you're always going back to one school, or there's always this one factor that you keep consistently going back to and thinking about, I think that's a pretty good sign that that's the right choice for you. But really, regardless, you know, you're going to find success sort of wherever you go. And so this is just one of the small decisions that you sort of have to make along your journey to becoming a medical physician.
I'll also throw out some advice on my end. I think, just to echo what people have said so far, some of the things that I thought were helpful, really asking current students at whatever school you're considering to talk about their experience as authentically as they can. And usually that means not asking them during an interview day, and sometimes not even like during second look if there's a ton of other people around, because sometimes you're not going to get the most candid feedback. So really taking time to get to know people and asking for their contact information so that you can talk to them offline or, you know, one-on-one. And also just choosing medical school, if you are choosing between more than one, is a very personal selection process that has so many just individual factors that you might be considering. So sitting down with somebody who knows you really well and knows the things that you might be looking for, and then someone who has insight into the schools that you're considering, that usually would be like a current student, can be really helpful, because sometimes going with your gut is really helpful, but then also having objective piece of data that a current student is able to tell you that they wish that they considered something, or if there's a piece of information that you're putting a lot of value on that they don't think is as important, being a current student, that is also really helpful to know. Because I remember being a pre-med and there were things that I thought would be really, really important that at the end of the day doesn't really seem to be something that I think about often. Whereas there are things like diversity of clinical sites that I never really thought about until now. I'm really appreciative that I have that. So those are my pieces of advice. John or Manish, any other pieces of advice before we close off tonight's event?
I would just say at the end of the day, don't stress too much. Like, you will grow where you are planted, and you will like be a very different person after the 4 years. And like, you'd be surprised how much you can adapt to a different place, even if you don't think like where you end up is 100% the best fit.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree with that too. I think there's, as I was saying even earlier, sometimes you end up in places you don't see yourself going, and you realize once you're there that you really love it. So yeah, something, I guess, make the best educated decision you can in your specific circumstances at the end of your cycle. And at that point, just try and be content instead of constantly thinking about what could have happened. Because I think if you view things as in how can I make the best of where I am, you'll just end up being happier as a result, rather than being fixated on the past or what if and things like that.
All right, thank you everybody for participating. For those of you who came out, especially for those of you in your finals week, this will be recorded to YouTube if you want to rewatch it later. But with that, I'll say goodnight to everyone. Thanks.